You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. This is Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. There are ladies things that makes it official. Welcome to 16 years of the Chris Voss Show. Man, my back is tired of carrying this show all these years, but we give you guys so many wonderful episodes, 2 to 3 episodes a day, or weekday, I should say. We do take Saturdays and Sundays off, but we're further sure your family, friends, and relatives. Like, this is the time of year where you're going to be hanging out with them in at Christmas, December, and there's always that one uncle that he does his own research or whatever. So make sure you refer to him to the Chris Voss Show so we can bring him up, his IQ up, at least, we can double it to 10 points instead of 5. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, YouTube.com/Chris Voss, Facebook.com/Chris Voss, all the crazy places of the internet. And as always, don't yell at me on YouTube 10 years from now like you do. It is December 2024, so if it's February 2050 and we're still alive as a species, do not leave a comment. Anyway, you guys always do. We have an amazing young man on the show today. We're going to be talking about addiction and issues that you can identify through his work and his help, some of his cool books that he has, and everything else. Today we have Timothy Reigle on the show with us today. His latest book is out called Men of Grit. I feel like I should say that with a raspy voice. Men of Grit. Anyway, sorry, I'm just having some fun here. It is entitled Men of Grit, Into the Wilderness, a 40-day challenge to renew your faith, restore your masculinity, and re-energize your family. Out September 30th, 2024. Timothy Reigle is the founder of IntoTheWildernessBlog.com, a blog dedicated to helping men overcome sexual addiction and transform their lives by renewing their faith, re-energizing their family, and restoring their masculinity. He is a licensed chaplain and works with men through Bible study, preaching, coaching to overcome pornographic addiction and become better men. He lives in Pennsylvania with his wife and 2 daughters. Welcome to the show, Timothy. How are you?
I am doing great. Glad to be here.
There you go. Glad to have you. An epic beard, my friend. You've got the beard thing down. I tried to do that, I think last year, and I just couldn't pull it off. I'm just not that slick. So
yeah, it's going well. It's starting to turn gray a little bit in the corners, but I still got it. So,
but you got the alpha beard, the look thing. I was always jealous of trying to get that right, and for some reason, I just look like a drunk old Orson Welles, fat old Orson Welles with my beard. So, Timothy, give me your comments. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, they can find me at my IntoTheWildernessBlog.com or TimothyReigle.com. It goes to the same place. You can find me there. You can find me on social media. I'm pretty active on Twitter. It's the same thing, at Timothy Reigle, and Instagram, same thing, at Timothy Reigle.
There you go. So, Men of Grit. Give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside your new book?
So our new book is designed for men and to build strong men. Men as a whole a lot of men are in trouble today. Mm-hmm. They've allowed the world is against them, and they've allowed weakness and complacency to infiltrate their lives. And they're sitting on the sideline. And so we're calling men to action, to band together as brothers, to become strong in body, mind, and spirit, to become better husbands, fathers, leaders in their churches, communities, and their families. Telling them to, hey, get off the sidelines, get in the game, engage in the fight, get right with the Lord, become the best husband and father that you can be. And just try to instill all those things about masculinity that we know to be true deep down inside of us, but yet has been repressed or ostracized by society for many years. And we encourage men to embrace that and become the strong men that our world needs.
There you go. I run huge dating groups where we try and circumvent dating apps, which don't really get you into relationships.
That's true.
And we try and solve the problem that you speak of young men. I mean, this is all there's statistics and data on all of this that young men are checking out. I have huge gaming communities as well on Discord, and men, young men, I mean Gen Z guys, they're checked out. They're not interested in women. They're 24-year-old virgins. They're they're just tuned out, and they're not interested in starting families. Some it's affordability thing. In our dating groups, 90% of men are not dating. They're just kind of sitting on the sideline. And I think they're looking at, a lot of different things that are going on out there. What is it? More boys aren't going to college than ever before. There's more women going to college than men, which is a problem for women because they can't find men that are above them on a hypergamy income and social status scale because more women are going to college. I mean, they're going to be fighting over a much smaller thing. And then the biggest complaint I get from women in my dating communities and people I coach is they can't find masculine men. A lot of the men are feminized. And then conversely, of course, they're suffering from their own masculinity too as well. That seems to be the biggest challenge I have in the market is finding feminine women. So you speak to something that is a real challenge in our society right now. Tell us about this 40-day challenge and what that's about in your book.
So where that kind of came about was myself and my co-author, Jerry Adams. We had both written books previously. I wrote my first book, which is called Living Porn Free, which detailed my journey from freedom from a devastating years-long addiction, which almost destroyed my marriage and family. Jerry had written a book kind of similarly sharing his journey from kind of a life of weakness to becoming a better, stronger man. And so the both of us kind of realized and over time that the biggest thing that men needed was a guidebook. They needed an action plan. They had read our books and they were like, I agree with all this. This is great. I need this in my life. And they agreed with all these sort of things. And they understood these principles and these philosophies and things. They didn't know where the hell to start. Right. And so that's what happens with a lot of guys is you get this kind of analysis paralysis where they read all this stuff, they do all this stuff, but they don't put any of it into action. They don't actually apply it to their daily life. And so we created the 40 days to be just that, to be an action plan. It's okay. You don't have to have everything perfect. You don't have to have all the answers, but you do need to start. You put one foot in front of the other and get going. And so we created this challenge in that frame to provide a place for men to start, to just go, okay, one day we're going to be a little bit better than the day before. And just keep building on that throughout the 40 days. And by the end of the 40 days, you realize you've made some big changes in your life and you're well on your way to becoming the man that you know that you want to be and God wants us to be.
There you go. It is something that men are struggling with right now, and they don't know where to start. I was lucky enough to be on the cusp of what I call when alphas started to die off and the new emotionalism, feminism sort of started to rise in the 70s. My grandfather was set an example for me as an alpha male, and my father was the first one to break emotionally. I'm not sure. I still don't know where the disconnect was between how my father ended up the way he did compared to my grandfather, who was kind of my original father. But I had that blueprint, and I also had that blueprint from my and growing up, I had a blueprint from my grandmother, who was his wife, as what a matriarch was and what a true feminine woman was. And so I've had those blueprints that were put before me, and, I spent my time in them. What was kind of interesting was I lived a kind of an interesting life where my opposing grandmother and grandpa had the flip script with the, she was very masculine, he was very feminine, or he's more passive, really. I mean, he was kind of a man's man, but he's very passive. It was a second marriage, and they were both in their senior ages, but I could see the problems with her being stuck in her masculine that a lot of women talk to me about today. It's daunting, it's uncomfortable, it's hell for them. It seems kind of fun at first day. Hey, we get to go play men, and there's that. Tell us about. So I was lucky enough to have these blueprints, is what I'm saying, where most men don't, because the last 3 generations or so, whatever, since the '60s, A lot of it's been drilled out, and we can delve into that. Tell us about your journey, about your experience, how you were raised, and how you got down this pathway and found out you were suffering from addiction and these elements.
Right. So I grew up in a Christian home. My dad was a pastor. I grew up in rural Illinois outside Chicago, small farm town. And so I grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s. And the big thing back then was the whole kind of purity culture, purity movement, right? And so I have a very happy, healthy, loving home, and my parents are wonderful. And I have a great relationship with my parents. I don't have a lot of the big red flag trauma that some people do. But what I came across was kind of the big three back then were don't drink, don't smoke, don't have sex amongst the evangelical Christian community. Well, when you're a hormonal, active, rebellious teenage boy and a pastor's kid to boot, right? What do you think the three things I wanted to do most were, right?
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Exactly. And I did that. And so I got into that and discovered that. And it was like, holy crap, this is awesome. Right? You see porn for the first time, or you have sex for the first time, and you're like, why was I told this was such a terrible thing? Right. And it was well-intentioned. Those sort of things were, they were following what God wants for our lives, but it was just this, there was no understanding of why. I see the consequences now. No one ever explained the consequences to me when I was a kid. And it was just these hard rules. Right. And so what's our teenage boys going to do? They're going to rebel against the hard rules. That's what we're, how we're made. And I just got hooked from there. And as you go through things as a young man, and your brain is still developing, and you're learning how to live in the world, things happen to you. And so I had things where in hindsight, they're not that big of a deal. And even then, it's just teenage stuff that you go through, your high school girlfriend dumps you, or your friend group changes, or something like that. But at that young, tender age, I learned to deal with that by using porn as a coping mechanism. Right. It became my go-to. When I was sad, I went to porn. When I was angry, I went to porn. When I was mad, when I was, it was, I never really properly learned how to deal with emotions and how to deal with hardship and those type of things. It became my crutch for everything. And as I got older, it continued to get worse. And I did the whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll thing. I played in metal bands and punk rock bands for years, got covered in tattoos, the whole works, and that was part of the lifestyle, right? Was promiscuity and drugs and alcohol and those type of things. And so I did that for many years, and then I got married. It was kind of the whole summer of '69. Joey quit, Jimmy got married, whatever. And
Adams,
right. And I thought that would kind of be the end of those kind of wild days. And that was naive. Right. And because now I'm dealing with real hard things. I'm dealing with marriage. I'm dealing with fatherhood, dealing with all those things. And instead of that going away, it got worse. And I learned to rely on it more. And it escalated from just excessive porn use to back then chat rooms were big and webcams. And this was before OnlyFans and stuff. But I would have been into that if it was there. And eventually got into where I was unfaithful to my wife many times. And it had multiple affairs and hookups and all these type of things. And so that continued off and on for the first 10 years of our marriage. Right. Wow. And I got caught.
It sounds like it went on for a long time.
It really did. Yeah. I mean, from the time
that 10 years
after I was married, I mean, from the time it was started, I mean, I was probably 13 or 14 when I first started looking at porn and till I was 30 when it, in my early 30s when I overcame it. So I got caught by sometimes, and I BS'd my way out of it. And I did all the things you're supposed to do. I went to Bible studies. I read books. I went to counseling. I did, all these things you're supposed to do. None of them really, really helped.
Can I ask, interject real quick?
Sure.
How come counseling didn't work? How come that didn't work?
Well, I think what I needed was I needed it from multiple angles. The problem with a lot of counseling is is they go into too much of the clinical emotional stuff without a framework to build on.
Yeah.
So there's one of two ways people kind of look at this, and they're both, neither are wrong and neither are right. And you kind of need all those aspects together. So it's either all counseling and just come in and just cry all night and let it all out, and kind of the, you know, your cliche, you know, therapy type of things, or it's the complete opposite where it's just man up and stop. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think it
without
takes
a blueprint to work from.
Right. It takes a level of emotional work, but it's also a level of foundational work and logistical work where you need to have the boundaries in place. You need to have the habits in place. You need the accountability. You need all those sorts of things, you know, and so I think a lot of things are too one-sided. And that's what really made the difference for me when I had someone come into my life that finally helped me overcome it after all these years, gave me that framework. He's like, okay, you need habits, you need routines, you need accountability, you need somebody to give you a kick in the ass every once in a while. You know, you need all these things, but those are only going to go so far, right? You need to do the deep work to uncover the why behind it. What was the, you know, why did I run to porn addiction? What was I running away from? What was I escaping from? But at the same time, if you do all that emotional work, but you don't have any foundation to fall back on, and you start peeling off layers of Band-Aids and scar tissue with nothing to protect yourself, you're going to fall right back into it. And so I think that was the difference for me, is I didn't have everything all together at once. You know, it was either man up and fix it, or, you know, let's talk about those emotions, but I don't have any sort of foundation to fall back on.
There you go. And it might have been too, I watched the video intro of yours, is to identify the trauma and come clean with it.
Right.
For some people, you know, we've talked to hundreds of psychologists in the show. We've talked traumas. It seems like we talk about trauma a lot because, you know, a lot of these issues that people have in life, they all come from childhood. They come from childhood blueprints, childhood damage. Everything kind of revolves from our childhood. I mean, I had a mic in my face when I was a child, and now I do when I'm 56. I don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, so maybe I did want to be a radio DJ when I was a kid. But yeah, a lot of it's the trauma, and it's just, sometimes it's just a matter of identifying the trauma, or identifying that you have a problem. You know, I mean, the first step with addiction and like Alcoholics Anonymous, or I think most rehabs, is
12 steps.
Admitting you have a problem. You know. And a lot of people do that, especially with AA. They go to God because, you know, they kind of realize they're out of control and they need a source bigger than themselves to deal with it. And, you know, addiction is hard. And most people that are in addiction issues, they're in rehabs, things like that, they're coping with some sort of addictive process. So I've lived in Vegas most of my life. So we have a lot of people that gamble, and usually people that have addictive personalities can run the gambit of multiple addictions. So they can do, you know, porn, alcohol, drugs. You know, the worst place to have an addiction personality is in Vegas.
I'm sure.
We give you everything. And so, you know, being able to identify what that problem is, and the trauma, and therapy isn't really made for men. I think it's really important to discern. It's made for women. And if you understand how it was created by Freud, he initially found traction with women, and it's talk therapy. Women talk through their feelings, they talk through their emotions. Well, men aren't really programmed for that. We're designed to be stoic and process our emotions through logic and reason. But in a world where men have been grown up to basically be women, in the society biological overflip they've tried to pull on us the last 30 years, 60 years, 3 generations, it's kind of an issue. So how do you finally break through with, do you have to identify the trauma as a child? And
I think so. Yeah. And I think men process emotions differently, but we also, we do have that thing where we share our emotions, but we don't do it in the same way that women do.
Yeah.
Right. Women sit down in a room, and this is going to sound cliche, but they sit down in a room and they cry together. Right. You know, and that's kind of how modern, as you said, modern therapy is designed.
Yeah.
Right.
The emotive.
And that's way men really bond and they grow, and by action, by doing something together. right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at all these
Tribal.
guys that have that bond after they've gone to war together, or
Yeah.
teammates on a sports team, or whatever it might be. And that was kind of the idea behind our book was, hey, let's
Mm-hmm.
do this challenge together and we'll bond. And yeah, we're going to share our vulnerabilities and share our weaknesses so that we can become stronger. But men do it in a different way.
Yeah, we do.
And
But when you
for
study it, it's
me,
because we're tribal. You know, I mean, we're
yeah,
designed to be
yeah,
a tribe. We're designed to
absolutely.
roll together. That's why we haze each other to test whether we're strong enough to go
Exactly.
fight and battle together because we,
Right.
we want each other to be strong.
Right.
Because the weak guy, you know, he runs off with the spear. We're like, hey, we needed the spear to kill the woolly mammoth, dude. You know, that sort of shit. So,
Yeah. And that's what made the difference for me too, was somebody not just preaching at me, someone not just, the white coats coming at me, right, and trying to
Mhm.
shrink me. It was, hey, brother, I love you. Let's go through this together. Let's fight this battle together. And I'm here in the trenches side by side with you. And that's what made the difference for me, is someone was able to pour into me that way
Mhm.
and love me and support me when I was down.
Mhm.
And like I said earlier, give me a kick in the ass when I needed it too.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how men work. That's how God made us. And
Mhm.
so that's what really made the difference for me. But yeah, I did have to identify some of the traumas. And I think by identifying, for me, it was stop minimizing them.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I didn't have, I didn't deal with any sort of abuse or neglect, or my parents didn't get divorced, or somebody didn't die. There was none of that a lot of the guys I work with now have.
Mhm.
It was more subtle things, but they affected me in different ways. So I
Mhm.
mentioned earlier, like just high school relationships, and I mean, now that I'm almost 40, it's like, you got dumped in high school. Who gives a shit? Right. Like, who cares? Right. Who didn't,
Yeah, that's true. I
um,
guess.
but I realized that was a major part in my life where I gained this fear of rejection.
Oh, wow.
And that fear of rejection has stuck with me.
Wow.
And I learned at 16 years old, 15, whatever, to deal with that through porn. And
Wow.
so that wound stayed with me. And so
Mhm.
now, fast forward all these years, the trigger might change, but the
Mhm.
rejection still is the same. So I might be 30 and my boss rips me a new one at work. I get chewed out at work.
Mhm.
That has nothing to do with sex, certainly has nothing to do with the initial rejection I got when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
But deep inside, in the emotional level, I feel that same fear of
Wow.
rejection, of I'm not good enough, of there's something wrong with me. And how did I learn to deal with those fears and those anxieties and those insecurities? I ran away to porn.
Yeah.
So that's how this stays with us from
Mhm.
our youth, where a lot of times these wounds happen, up into our adulthood. And that's why something I say all the time is that porn addiction has nothing to do with sex. It
Mhm.
has everything to do with pain and how you deal with pain.
Mm.
And that's kind of the connection that I had to make and learn, to be like, hey, this is where these insecurities came from.
Yeah. It's a cope.
Yeah.
You're coping. You're using an emotional crutch to cope. And addictive personalities, of course, have a harder time with it. You
Mhm.
know, I've had a girlfriend who was an alcoholic that eventually killed her. I finally had to remove myself after going to AA with her and trying to help her. I never understood addiction or alcoholism before that, so it was a real hard thing to put my head around. I've had friends that, they start jonesing, they start shaking if they don't get their
Mhm.
fix of cigarettes or marijuana or booze, any sort of addiction. I think I have people that have lost their shit over gambling. Vegas, you see a lot of it. Like, you have to be really careful who you make friends with in Vegas, because if
I
they have
bet.
an addictive personality, you're gonna have a problem. But you speak to something too. Men need a tribe, and
Yes.
I believe there's data and study on this. Don't sue me if I'm wrong, but our masculinity actually goes up when we're around other men, and we tribe with other men.
Right.
I grew up in the age that I like to call the last of the alphas, with my grandfather, where we did Boy Scouts and we did man shit on Boy Scouts.
Oh yeah.
We were like He-Men, or at least I wasn't. I was the little skinny, scrawny kid of the thing, but we had a lot of He-Men sort of Boy Scouts, and bonding with other men, hanging with other men. Is one of the things that I've always enjoyed, because I learned that was a thing. My grandfather would take us out fishing, camping, he taught us all those things. And when you look back on it, I would think, oh, we just went fishing. My grandfather taught me fishing. What the F was that about? When I was a kid. And it turns out it wasn't about the fishing. It's about the bonding.
Yeah.
Men can just being together and doing men's stuff raises our testosterone. And over the last 60 years, we've had our spaces invaded by women and estrogen. We've had chemicals introduced in our systems that are estrogenics, like parabens and different things that have attacked our testosterone levels. It's so pervasive that with the estrogen chemicals that are in our cleaners and soaps and stuff we come in contact, that women, young girls, are having their periods at like 9 instead of 12. It's advancing their systems as well. And so without that tribalness, one of the things I've always struggled with most of my life is trying to keep a tribe of men around me and understand the importance of having men I can go to. Throughout my dating history, I would always have wingmen that would they'd the first time a woman showed them any sort of attention or interest or sex bomb them, they'd be like, "Hey, Chris, I'm leaving my men tribe. I'm going to go off and do the woman thing and the husband thing." And I'm like, you still need men friends. She's got men friends in her committee, buddy. You isolate yourself, you're really putting yourself in a bad position.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of men, I don't know, somewhere they just picked up some sort of thing that you're just supposed to abandon your friends and your male friends when you get into a marriage. I don't know where that crap started, but
we as a society have kind of ostracized that male bond.
Yeah.
Right. If two guys are very close best friends,
mm-hmm.
What's society call them? Right. They're gonna make gay jokes. They're gonna call it a bromance.
Yeah.
They're gonna do whatever. Right.
Yeah.
And they're going to alienate that to where men just don't do it because they see it as this bad thing when it's not. And so, yeah, men need that connection. Right. And yeah, so many men, like you say, you have that friend who you're good friends until he gets a girlfriend, then you never see him again. Right. Yeah. Until they break up and then you see him again.
Then they call you when
then they call you when shit hits the fan. Right.
When they break up.
Right. But, men need that they need it sounds cliche, but they need their man time. Right. Yeah. And that's not, and that man time needs to be substantial. And now the only time men get man time, it's revolved around drinking. It's revolved around sports. It's revolved around, and there's nothing wrong with those things in and of themselves, but men aren't pushing to make themselves better. Right. Yeah. And so that's one of the things that Jerry and I are trying to do through this book is to be like, there's nothing wrong with having a beer and watching a football game on Sunday with your buddies. But if that's what your life revolves around, if you're living vicariously through millionaires on a football field that you've never met and doing nothing while you sit on your ass on the couch, right? That's a problem, right? Yeah. And so we need to band together to have a mission and a purpose and a goal together. That's where men bond most. It isn't the bonding itself that brings men together. It's the mission and the goal and the common purpose that brings men together and that they bond over.
Yeah. It's having that goal. And a lot of men have lost their missions in life. And,
or they make the woman the mission.
Yeah. Yeah.
We talk about that in the book. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the greatest things I ever heard is men are, what was it? Men are islands, women are boats. They come and go. If you understand women's sexuality and their hypergamy and how they operate, and it's a feature, not a bug. It's designed to propagate the species. I used to tell my friends that before I even had heard that quote in my 30s. My friends that would come to me and be like, "Hey, Chris, we can't hang out anymore." She says that, you have this bikini team modeling agency and you're like the Hugh Hefner of Utah. I can't hang out with you because you're a bad influence. And I'm like, you're being isolated by a narcissist who is isolating you. She's telling you can't be with me as a friend, but next she'll tell you that you can't see your kids if you have them. I've seen that with divorcees. Or, she's going to say you can't talk to your family anymore. You're being isolated by a narcissist. And that doesn't happen with everyone, but usually most of the men that I would have that happen, and then they would break up, and then they would call me, "Hey, can we be best friends again?" And then 6 months later, "Hey, I met this girl, Chris," And I'm like, you know what, fuck you, man. You don't understand manhood. And I used to tell guys, I used to say, men are friends for a lifetime. Women will come and go throughout a man's life, but men are friends for a lifetime. And loyalty, the aspects of masculinity, loyalty, trust, having men have your back. A lot of the guys who go to the military, they love the brotherhood. And like you say, it's working on that purpose, and every man needs to have a purpose. But masculinity and men have been under attack for a good 60 years now. They've been told masculinity is toxic by psychologists that are largely feminists that have taken over psychologies.com or whatever psychologies things. They've been told that masculine is toxic, it's bad to, live your life as a purpose. And they've basically been turned into kind of these lost boys. And I see that in the gaming community. A lot of these young men, even me. I mean, I use gaming as a way to hang out with other men and build that tribe because we're so kind of spread out and isolated. But they've turned to that as a way to try and do what my grandfather used to do with us, where we would go fishing, or some people did hunting and different things. So, yeah, it's definitely a thing where men have lost their purpose and been under attack for it. Timothy?
Yeah.
I didn't follow up that with a question. I just kind of left the hanging chat out.
No, that's all right. Yeah. And I had that same thing too, where we went out and I grew up on a farm. So we went out and, we worked on the farm together. There was a purpose there, or sports teams, there was different things like that. And so, video games and different things like that, they're ways for men to bond. The problem is if that's the only way that men bond.
Yeah. And if it turns into addiction, right?
Right. Because that can be, to me, it's comparable to porn. Now, on the surface, that sounds really weird, right? But the idea is that you're doing something very masculine, right? You're either going out to try and conquer worlds, through video games in whatever form that might be, or you're going out to try and conquer a woman and trying to mate and procreate and find a wife. You're doing both of those and getting a quasi reward from that, but it's not requiring anything of you.
Yeah.
There's no risk, right? It doesn't require you to be strong. It doesn't require you to be anything really. You can just do it in your underwear in your mom's basement, right?
Yeah.
And so especially with porn, there's no risk of rejection there. And that's a lot of like why I went to that, because it made me feel strong. It made me feel good enough. It made me gave me rejection. This, and there was no risk, right?
Yeah.
There's no rejection. You're always good enough. You're always the best. You're always wanted, right? There's no risk of some girl shutting you down, right? And in video games in the same way, it's different, but it's the same because there's adventure, there's common goal, there's purpose. You bind together. You're going out, like I said, to conquer worlds. But again, it doesn't require anything of you. There's no risk of actually being injured. There's no risk of being hurt. There's no sense of rejection in that either. And so both of them are kind of living vicariously and trying to get some sort of external reward without any sort of skin in the game or any sort of risk on your part.
And I would say you're right. I would say it's a kind of misaligned purpose. Well, it's cool to do the tribal thing and keep focus on it. I see men that are addicted to do it as well. Or, one thing that's always disturbing is if, we're playing with somebody and we're hearing their kid cry in the background. And so they're not doing a very good job as a father.
Sure.
And men need, we need our tune-out time. We need our things there. But, when you're, when I see a guy who's on for 6-10 hours a day and they've got kids, I don't have kids. They have kids, and I can hear kids screaming. I can hear the fire alarms that they're not fixing up in the roof going off.
Yeah.
And usually we give them, hey, dude, it takes 5 seconds to change the battery. Come on, man. Oh, I don't know how to do it. Well, you're a man. You need to learn to do this shit. But also a purpose. Yeah. A man's purpose. A man is designed to have a purpose, and a purpose is not a woman. It can be his family, but a man's purpose needs to be outside and above and beyond him. And so while gaming is great for the communal part, it has its small space.
Sure.
You need to be, like you said. I think what I'm trying to highlight that is you need to have your own purpose, because Call of Duty doesn't give a shit about you at the end of the day. No one's coming from Call of Duty to your funeral to speak at what a great freaking bot you
Right.
were. You know, um, I might come to your funeral and talk about how I trashed you in that one map. No, I'm just teasing. But the purpose that men have, and we need to find, and it's different for each of us what that purpose is.
Hmm.
Maybe it's to be a great author, to be an inspiring speaker, to be someone who changes. Our job is to serve the world and make the world a better place. Men come into this world as nothing at the bottom of the valley. And our job is to climb that mountain and make something of ourselves, so that number one, we contribute to society, and number two, we contribute to society and family and being a father and raising children and propagating the species, as it were. And that's what our demand is. Women start at the top of the mountain, and they're measured by how far they fall and how well femininity is preserved. Men start at the bottom; they're worthless. Even in the tribe, they're worthless. Like, put the new guy in the back, because I don't even think he's learned to throw the spear yet at the woolly mammoth. But you learn, you build yourself up.
Right.
And
You have to prove yourself.
Men start finding their way, but having that purpose in life of what they want to have and pursuing it where they own that purpose. You're never going to own Call of Duty. Especially because
Right.
you got to buy a new one every year or something.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think men need to have a purpose and a mission outside of themselves and outside of their wife and their family. I think too many men put their wife on a pedestal and they make her the mission, they make her the purpose, they make everything they do in life is for her. And that sounds great in a love song from the 80s, but it doesn't work in real life, because actually what she's going to do is she's going to end up resenting you,
Yeah,
right?
she's going to
You
treat him
know,
like a doormat.
how we were designed as men and women. If you look, faith is a huge aspect of what I do and who I am. And if you look at how we were created, God gave Adam a mission, a purpose. He said, go and have dominion over the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
And then he gave him a helper.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what our women in our lives are supposed to be. Our wife is supposed to be. She's supposed to be our helper on the mission. She's not supposed to be the mission herself.
Mm-hmm.
And women are attracted to that. They're attracted to driven men, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times they're even attracted to bad men, but they're attracted to them because they're driven and they're ambitious, and they have a mission and a goal and a purpose in life. There's a reason they get up every day.
Yeah.
And so women are attracted to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so men need to have a vision, a mission, a purpose, something that gets them out of bed every morning. God has put a mission on my life, and that's my purpose in life. I think I was brought through all the trials and the darkness and the heartache and everything that I went through, so that I could turn around and help other men through it. That's the mission that God's laid on my heart, is to help other men get out of this. And porn is the most prevalent thing in that, I believe, but there's so many other aspects about that. When you talk about, masculine strength, physical strength, mental strength, leadership, the duty of man that we have to lead and provide and protect, and to lead our families and to lead people.
Yeah.
And so
to celebrate masculinity. I mean,
right.
This whole narrative that masculinity is bad, it's kind of interesting, because when you really look at what feminism is, it's not a celebration of the feminine. It's basically go be men.
Right.
And do men things. And you're like, invade men's spaces. And the conversation I have with women, even the most ardent of feminists that I have, if you get them privately, is they either have a masculine, feminine role in their homes. I saw a lot of that in 2020 when we'd have authors on the thing. You'd find that maybe sometimes the forward-facing PR didn't match, and they had a traditional marriage of hypergamy and everything else. But a lot of the women that I talk to privately, they're desperate. They are so burnt out on being the man. They're so burnt out on being in their masculine, because they're not designed for it long term.
No.
They're designed to be in their feminine.
It's a double-edged sword, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because we've pushed this feminist movement, we tried to make women men, and because of that, the men have become women, right?
Yeah.
So what happens is the woman and the wives have had to take in the masculine role in the relationship in the family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and the
because
men
if men
take on.
drop the gauntlet, then
Right. So,
women
and
will
it's
pick it up
both,
to be
you know,
safe.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's so because she's taken on that, then he shrinks down
Hmm.
and is emasculated, you know, sometimes
Yeah.
literally. And women who have to take on the masculine role are resentful of that, right?
Yeah.
And it's portrayed in modern 21st century Western culture as, you know, oh, you're breaking a glass ceiling, you're I'm a strong independent woman, I don't need no man, you know. And not that women can't have goals and can't have be in
Sure.
the workplace and can't do those
Sure.
things. I'm not saying that. But when
Mhm.
she has to take on that masculine role of what I believe that is she's taking on that masculine role of headship that the Bible talks about, where the man is the head of the family, like Christ is the head of the church. When she has to take on that headship role, that leadership role, she's not designed for that. God didn't make her that way.
Mhm.
He made men that way. And
Yeah.
so that has consequences then, because then she resents the man. The man feels like less than a man. So he's more likely to turn to porn, to turn to addiction, to turn to other things to feel like a man. When you think
Mhm.
about porn, what is it? It makes you feel like a man. You're doing the
Yeah.
essence of masculinity, which is procreating,
Mhm.
and but it requires nothing of you. You don't have to do anything, right?
Yeah.
And so
And there's
it's
no
fake,
rejection.
and
Yeah.
there's no rejection. So that's what men turn to when they feel emasculated, when they feel less than, when they feel weak. They
Yeah.
want to feel strong. They want to feel like a man. So
Yeah.
men find vicarious ways to do that through porn. They do it through video games. Why do you think sports is such a billions upon billions of dollars of thing? All
Yeah.
right.
You're
Sports is fun. I love
vicariously living
sports.
through
You
someone
know,
else.
yeah, I'm a big sports
Yeah.
fan, but really
Yeah.
you're living someone else's adventure
Yeah.
when you're
Yeah.
doing that. When you watch all these masculine macho movies, now I love movies like that, you know, Braveheart and 300 and all those things. They're great movies.
Yeah.
But what they are to a lot of guys is they're living out someone else's adventure through that.
Yeah.
They're
On
living out
purpose.
their innate masculinity through something on TV while they sit in their couch and drink
Yeah.
and eat
Which
Cheetos,
drinking
right?
increases your estrogen, by the way.
Again, right, exactly. That's what I mean. There's these so many different layers of this, and they all just create this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And it takes somebody to have the discipline, the willpower, and the brotherhood of men to keep pushing out of that.
Let's get a plug in for your book, your second book, I
Yeah.
believe, Living Porn Free: 10 Steps to Recovery, Redemption, Renewal. Do I have that correct?
Yeah.
On the title?
Yes. Yeah. That was actually my first book that I
Okay.
wrote about 4 years ago. And what that is just kind of my story of how I overcame my addiction and the steps that I used to do that.
Mhm.
And so the steps that are part of that are, you know, understanding some of the things that I talked about earlier, having that framework, having those boundaries, you know, putting up guardrails in our lives to protect ourselves, understanding our triggers, having better habits, having routines, having accountability, all those framework things. And then after we figure those out, then diving in and understanding the why, understand the emotions of it. Something I say all the time is porn addiction isn't something you quit. Porn addiction is something you heal.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
addiction is addiction. You have to
right.
work at it every day.
Right. It's not just having, and that's why so many guys struggle with it, because they treat it just like a bad habit.
Mhm.
Right. And I think you can just, you know, pull yourself out of your bootstraps and just man up and grit and determination yourself to get through it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work because that's not the cause of the addiction.
Exactly.
Right.
You're
And
coping.
so what happens is eventually your need to cope, your need to, that emotional pull to escape is going to overpower your discipline,
Mhm.
no matter how strong you are. And that's why guys relapse, because that emotional need for it overpowers the discipline and the willpower. And so that's why discipline and willpower alone aren't enough. That's why you need those to understand the why of the addiction.
And that's why most people have to go to a higher power for the help.
Mhm.
I mean, that's
Amen.
always
Yeah.
goes to God, and you know, for some people it's easier to process that because they realize they're out of control,
Mhm.
and that emotional loop, that the connection they have to whatever their addiction is hard to come back. And like I said, a lot of people, you have to identify the trauma of what, you know, your child, and it's always from childhood. Um, that, or you know, someone didn't put ice in the Coke or something when
Right.
you were a
Right.
kid.
And those identifying those traumas and right. And understanding these emotions doesn't excuse the behavior. Right.
No.
When I say that all these things that happened to me in my childhood and this fear of rejection, these fears I'm not good enough, that doesn't excuse the horrible things I did to my wife and my family. Right.
Hmm.
But it helps me understand why they happened. If I understand why they happened, then I can learn how to deal with them in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I don't want somebody to listen to this and be like, oh, he's just making all these excuses for husbands that look at porn and cheat on their wives. No, I'm not.
No.
But I'm explaining why that happened to me and
Mhm.
why it happens to so many other guys, because that's how we heal it and fix it.
Yeah, you can't until you address the underlying problem, the root of the problem. I really wish they need to have classes in school about dealing with well, they need to teach what addiction is and what addiction personality is. I think
Sure.
20% of our population has it or something like that. Maybe I'm thinking of a gambling addiction because in Vegas,
Yeah, I don't
they
know
always say
about
it's
that,
about
but
70%, but it's 17%. But
they
I swear to
say
God, it's about a third.
there was a survey done a couple of years ago by a group called Covenant Eyes, which has a software. There's a porn blocking software.
Oh yeah,
And this is 4 or 5 years old now. But at that time, they said of people like 18 to 30 or teenage to early 30s, it was almost 80% of young men regularly watching porn.
Wow. The so so we covered that. Now you got a podcast too that we want to plug, right? You want
Sure.
to get a plug in for that as we
Yes, that's called the Into the Wilderness podcast. I've been going through, I've had a number of different guests on there. Now, the last 10 or so episodes have just been my co-author and I, and we just go through the book. So as part of the book, we came up with what we call 10 principles of a man of grit, which are the characteristics and the principles of a strong, godly man. And so we spent a podcast episode each going through those and understanding each one of those roles that and characteristics that strong men need to have. And so I've had other guests on my podcast talking about different types of things: leadership, physical strength, fatherhood, brotherhood, and fraternity, those type of things. And so, yeah, like the porn addiction is the primary thing I do, but it involves the whole man, right? And so we have to, once we've overcome porn addiction, you're really just getting back to square one, right? You're really just stopping something you should have never done in the first place. And so from there on, we can't just stop and say, hey, we've won because we've overcome this. We have to say, okay, now we're free to become the man that we're supposed to be. And so that's really the goal of Into the Wilderness in general, whether it's my book, whether it's the podcast, whether it's my writing and social media and all these different types of things that I do, is to Into the Wilderness comes from scripture, comes from Jesus going into the wilderness, and he had to face himself. He had to face the temptation of the devil, right? He had to face hardship of no food and fight off wild animals and all these different things. And he came from out of that ready for his mission, the mission that God had gave him to come to earth. And so we have to do the same thing. We have to go into our own wildernesses. We have to face our demons. We have to face ourselves. We have to be tried. We have to be tested and transformed and come out of that ready to take on our mission and our purpose in life.
Definitely. Yeah. If men don't realize that they don't have that purpose, they're just kind of lost, and everybody has that different purpose.
Right. A ship without a heading is just drifting. Right.
Man who plans to fail,
right.
plans to fail.
And there's a lot of men who don't have their sails up, or just drifting at sea wherever the tides take them. Right. Or even worse, a lot of men are still sitting in port because they're scared of the storms.
Yeah. And it's a lot of them haven't been equipped to handle it. One of the problems men have had is one of my favorite lines is from Fight Club, and Fight Club talks about a lot of the issues of men. We're for millennials, we're a generation born. I'm not a millennial, by the way, but we're a generation born.
I am.
Yeah. We're a generation born, being taught that, we'll all be rock stars and millionaires by the time we're 30, and we're finding out we're not. We're very angry about it. The bathroom scene is something I always come to, where Brad Pitt and him are in the bathroom, and they go, "We're a generation of men raised by women." The proliferation since the 60s of single motherhood has become, I would call, an epidemic. And somehow we created this societal attempts to put men down so women can rise in a level of scarcity, instead of a rising tide lifts all boats of there's enough for everybody. That what's the line from the bathroom scene in Fight Club? We're a generation of men raised by women. I'm not sure another woman is what we need.
We need more men to come in and to be those mentors to young men. And there's a lot of the rise of feminism, the rise of divorce, the broken families, and the way the family court system is heavily weighed against the men. All those sort of things come in. And then you add into that what we've been talking about is a lot of weak men, men that have let their wives wear the pants, if you will, and the wife has taken on that masculine role. Something I say a lot is there's a lot of fatherless homes where the dad's still living there.
I like that analogy.
Right?
Wow.
Right?
That's smacked
There's
it
a
out
lot
the
of
park.
homes and
Yeah,
there's a lot of
that's
kids
true.
without fathers, but their dad still lives in the house. He's another kid for the mom to raise.
Yeah.
Right? Is what it comes down to. And so that lack of fatherhood and the lack of good fathers and that lack of mentorship and that lack of teaching the next generation what it means to be a man has had consequences far beyond we can even imagine.
Yeah. The without everything comes down to blueprints. So a mother sets an example for what should be a feminine woman that a man should seek, and the qualities of a good woman in femininity and character. And then the father sets the example for the daughter, and having those things, but also the father sets an example what a good masculine man is to his son, and the relationship they see, the parity um, between the masculine and the feminine, is they see how it interacts. Even if it's a horrible relationship, they're going to see mother's emotionally, mother lives in emotion and it's fairly unstable, and father is the rock who's the stabilization through masculinity. And this is what a lot of the women complain to me about nowadays. Even the most ardent, I'm an independent, blah blah blah, I'm a boss babe, I can pay my own bills. Oh, congratulations, you're an adult, welcome. It's not a flex, people. But I mean, it's a flex for attention if you understand the cope of it, and validation. But it's somehow a mating call at the same time. It's really weird. But women can't find that. And the thing you spoke to, I've lost it twice now. I'm kind of rambling because I'm trying to find my way back to it. But men need the advice of other men. We need to share in that. I see a lot of men nowadays. They follow these. They follow these women dating coaches. These women who are going to tell them how to be men or men. And well, I love women, and they have some good ideas. They don't understand the hero's journey of a man and how a man is built.
Right.
Women come into their value at the peak of the mountain. The world loves them. It's a woman. We love the womb, and we do that on purpose. It's a feature, not a bug, because she carries with her the propagation of species. Everything we do is for propagating the species. Everything that the clothes you buy, the car you drive. I sound like Fight Club again. I'm Tyler Durden today, and so men have just gotten lost in that. And I don't think another woman's advice is what you need, but you also need to have masculine men helping guide you who can know what they were. And I was lucky enough, like I said, to have my alpha grandfather who set that blueprint with me, and my feminine grandmother who set that blueprint with me. And I could see how the difference in that, and what a great matriarch she was. My grandma was 50 running around trying to find dick. She was like being a great matriarch and being at the height of her feminine, which is very different from what's going on in today's world.
So, oh yeah. Yeah.
But,
yeah, absolutely. Men need other men. I take that from in my life from scripture. The Bible that's sitting behind me is open to Proverbs 27:17, which says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another.
Ah, I like that.
And that's what men need. Men need other men in their lives. They need what you want to call it, tribe, you want to call it brotherhood, whatever you want to call it. They need other men in their lives and become better together.
And then there was something I was going to speak to too. You mentioned it early in the show, and I think you touched on it once or twice in our conversation. Women are different in their nature than men, and it's real important. We are not equal in any way, shape, or form. We all have a heart. I don't know. Maybe you can say, but we are not equal as wholes. We're designed differently. We're designed to complement each other. We're designed to be the better, not the better of each other, but fill in the holes, I suppose. And be that puzzle piece complement. But women are communal, and women are nurturers. So when I go to my mom, she's designed. I've fallen and bleeding out of my knee or whatever. She's designed to coddle me and go and nurture me and go, it's okay, you're going to be fine. Don't cry. Here, let's get you hooked up. Your dad is going to teach you life lessons because he knows the world you're going to live in, because our hero's journey is different than a woman's. As always, as I mentioned before, they start at the peak of the mountain. The world adores them. As they age, they find that their dating market, sexual market value drops. One of the reasons men love younger women from all ages in data and study is because they have the highest chance of having fertility and also having healthy babies. That's why it's all about propagation of species.
Sure.
And so with men, they need to, they have a hero's journey. So we go into the wilderness. We start at the bottom of the mountain. We're worthless. I mean, we're so worthless, they send us off to war to die. And we have to build ourselves. We have to make ourselves into something. We don't really hit the peak of our dating sexual market value, the value that we bring to the world, till about 50s. Women hit their peak value in the dating sexual market around 23. We don't hit it till 50. And that's when we really hit our stride. And it's designed that way. If you understand, that's why women date up, et cetera, hypergamy. We're designed to go through that hero's journey. Women don't go through it, so they don't understand how you have to fight to become something and your value. They have to fight to retain their feminine, but we go through a hero's journey, and it's a 30-year, 40-year beat-up run before we hit what women experience at 20, 22, 23, where the whole world loves you, when we hit our peak of resources and stuff. And so men have to realize that. And so a woman can't tell you what that journey is. She doesn't even know what masculinity is. Women can, we can all be masculine and feminine with our parity, but we run on a core. There's either core that you run on, whether you're a masculine or whether you're feminine, and you're always going to default back to that core. But women don't understand what men go through. They don't understand masculinity. And the one aspect of female nature, partially because it's too emotionally hard on them, is self-accountability. And men get whipped through life. If we don't become something, if we don't be accountable, we'll get the crap kicked out of us. And as you mentioned, kind of what I'm rambling to, is men hold each other accountable. So, my dad, when I go to him and I cry that I fell off my bike and life isn't fair, he's going to kick me in the butt and go, "Buck it up, Buttercup. Life isn't fair. Get used to it." And he's not being mean. He's trying to prepare me for the world. He's trying to prepare me for being a man. He's trying to prepare me for my hero's journey, that it's going to be ugly, that men are going to be hard on me. But men are going to be hard on me because they want me to grow and they understand what it takes. And so that's what my thoughts on that.
No, I completely agree with you. And that's why we have a mother and a father, right? Because we need both of those things. We need that nurture. We need that support and that encouragement and that love. And we need that tough love as well. And men and women, what I like to say is that they're equal in value, like as a person, but they're not equal in role. Right? They're equal in value. We're all made in the image of God. We're all, we all have inherent human value as a person, but our roles are different. Our biologies are different. The way we interact with other people are different. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
And we've created this whole thing in the 21st century that there's something wrong with that. Both sides, that men aren't women enough and women aren't man enough. When God made us both male and female, he created them and they're perfectly fine just the way they are. We think we know better and we need to change that. And you see all the disastrous consequences in society, in the family, and sexuality that have come out of that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's interesting to me. I started tuning this stuff early on because, like I said, I had two opposing grandparents. One was the, alpha masculine and the feminine balance, and then one was hyper masculine, toxic. She was very toxic because she didn't want to be in her masculine, and she had to be. And so she adopted a lot of masculine traits. But out of that, women get really angry, bitter. They're very upset. A lot of the women I talk to that have been divorced, they, and a lot of men have been trained to deal with women's shit testing, with women's emasculation techniques, and the testing and why they do it. Sometimes women overdo it because they have their unresolved trauma from childhood. But a lot of men don't understand why women test that way, to make sure that you have a backbone, to make sure that you have a purpose as a man, to make sure that you're holding masculine frame. So yeah,
It's interesting. It's interesting you talk about shit tests because we actually have a chapter in the book on that. So my co-author Jerry wrote that day, and he calls it strength tests. He says the common term is a shit test, right? You know, when she's, but really what she's testing is your strength.
Yes.
Right. She's testing, are you going to be a rock when her emotions are all over the place?
Are you still on your purpose?
Yeah. Right. Can she depend on you when shit hits the fan?
Yeah.
Right. And so she's not when she's, it seems like she's nitpicking you and she's on all her bullshit and doing all this sort of stuff, you know, and she doesn't even know she's doing this most of the time. Yeah. Right. It's a subconscious thing that it's just an instinct sort of thing. She's looking to you to be that strength, to be that rock, to be that pillar for her. You know, when she's not looking for all the answers, she's not looking for you to be down and crying and sappy with her. She's looking for your strength. And so we've kind of taken that whole concept and reframed that into, it's not a shit test, it's a strength test.
Yeah. And she wants to make sure you're on a purpose. She wants to make sure you haven't pedestalized her and made her your purpose. She knows that you need something bigger. You know, there's a reason we are designed the way we are. I think Robert Greene has some great books on human nature, and they talk about how our nature was developed over eons of time, why women have the nature they do, why men have the nature they do. And so much of that has been lost, I think, in training stuff. And, you know, we've had psychologists on the show. We've talked about how boys have been stripped down and emasculated in schools, in activist schools, and schools that have largely pushed men out and become sort of feminist boundaries for pushing the narrative that, you know, boys are just defective girls, you know. And, you know, once again, it's kind of interesting. We've had men we've had a psychologist on the show that wrote books 20, 30 years ago predicting the downfall of boys and the struggle of boys that is present today. I mean, they called it. It's like prophetic to read it. You're just like, holy shit, you nailed it. But it's not that hard to figure out when you understand the big thing of what's going on and how, you know, there's attempts by people to basically flip biology. And they think that we can work off a scarcity syndrome, and that if the only way for women to rise is to push men down. And that's very unhealthy, because women's success in life, women's success in the family, women's, you know, their journey is tied to ours. And somehow there's been this thing where people are like, well, it doesn't have to be that way. No, we're tied together. We're on the ship together on the lifeboat here.
And that's
gotta get along.
Yeah, that's how it was meant to be, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, you know, God gave Adam a helper. You know, she's tied to him. She's a woman means of man, right? And so, and again, that doesn't mean women are less than. It doesn't mean they're inferior. It means they have a different purpose than we do. And
there's a spectacular too. I mean, I think, you know, one of the biggest things that when I talk to women and, you know, they've adopted basically trying to be men is they'll talk to me about their loss of femininity and how they miss it. But you know, they're being told, and sadly women are more susceptible to communal and peer pressure than men. You know, men are designed to be disagreeable, and out of that builds great meritocracies and all the things that we've built the world basically. Women are designed to be agreeable with each other. Well, I mean, it doesn't always work out if you get some women that want to badly influence women to do bad things. I mean, I've had friends that own strip clubs. I've had friends that own escort agencies. I've had friends that have owned, you know, different sex, you know, cameras and stuff like that. And the way you get a woman to recruit her for those things is you don't have a man go convince them. You have a woman go convince them to do it. The woman will pick her up in the club and be like, hey, you know what? I work with a strip club and you should come over here and make money. And the woman will go, oh, you know, no, that's I'm not, you know, that's immodest or whatever, and probably not good for me. And they go, oh, you don't have to strip. You can just be a server, and you know you can make a lot of money. And they're like, oh, I'll do the server thing. And you know they see how much money they can make, and oh, it's not that bad. And so it's always interesting to me. You hear a lot of the narrative that men get women to do bad things. No, women get women to do bad things. But that communal thing, And so it's really important for men to understand female nature. You know, there was a comedian a long time ago who said, you know, the problem with men and women and that men have is when we're young, women get all these magazines and books on how to get men to do what you want, basically. I remember reading my girlfriend's, I forget the name, Cosmopolitan, I think it was. She would have Cosmopolitan in her house, and I would read it, and I'd be like, hey, this is an instruction manual on how to manipulate men. Like, what the hell? I don't get this. And, you know, the comedian said, you know, men, what do we get for instruction on how to understand women? We get Playboy. Here's somebody new. Go get them. You know, that's what we get. And so a lot of men aren't trained. And, you know, an alpha masculine father used to set that example, but they don't have that so much anymore. So, yeah, we need some more learning.
I agree.
There you go. And that's what you're doing. So as we go out, Timothy, give us your .coms, give people the final pitch out to pick up your books, all that good stuff.
Yeah, best way to find me is my website, timothyreigle.com, or you can find me on social media at Timothy Reigle. Both books, Living Porn Free and the brand new book, Men of Grit Into the Wilderness, are available on Amazon.
There you go. And it's time to bring back masculinity, boys. If you really see what's gone on in politics recently, I'm not sure it's fully healthy, but a return to masculinity. Even women voted for that. And I see that in the private conversations I have with women. They do something different in public with their flex and cope. And if you kind of understand, it's kind of a weird save me sort of thing when they do the I'm an independent woman. It's a weird signaling of you know, come save me sort of thing, if you understand that logic and mentality behind it. But when I talk to them privately, I mean, they so desperately want to go back to their being in their feminine. They're so fried. It burns them out. It gives them emotional damage to be in it for long periods of time because they just want to be nurturers, and that's their nature. And when you fight your nature, you're kind of fucked. So good for that. There you go. So thank you very much, Timothy, for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Order up the book, folks, wherever fine books are sold, called Men of Grit Into the Wilderness, a 40-day challenge to renew your faith, restore your masculinity, and re-energize your family. I think one of the things I'll finish, too, with all the women that are in my big dating groups, I mean, we're talking thousands, they all want a masculine man, regardless of what they say about femininity or feminism or whatever. They are all looking for a masculine man. And they want that. They want masculine frame. They want a guy who can hold his purpose and live his purpose. They want a guy who can do it. And it's hard to find it. But, you know, I just kind of go, well, you know, you raised them, so there you go.
That's what we're looking to build, is those strong men.
Yeah, and get back to the way we're supposed to be. So it'll be interesting. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Foss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Foss. Chris Foss, one of the TikTokity and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time. And that should have us out. Great show, man. Wonderful.